machine learning?
Over many years, this has been an iterative visit with us.
Calling it year 5?
Yeah.
I think we might have skipped one for the pandemic.
Well, I was still at Synopsis when you did the first one.
That's
so
right.
That's over 6 years ago then.
That's right.
Yeah. So I want to, let's see. Okay, great. And we are recording this meeting today, as Dan has actually requested us to do. We don't always record virtual events, but Dan asked us to do that. So you all get to say that you're okay with being recorded. So without further ado, I will let Dan take it from here.
Thank you, Terry. Good to reconnect with old friends, meet new friends. I see a lot of familiar faces on the in the virtual event. So thanks for joining us. Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI-first platform that automates the delivery of IT and HR employee service. PeopleRain is here to give every employee back about 4 to 8 hours a week. And we believe that the future of work is when every employee brings their best self to work and feels trusted and valued and respected. We're rapidly approaching a world where we believe that using advanced technologies like AI and machine learning, that will be the case. I was put on this planet to help 1 billion employees have better lives at work. And gosh, I'm not quite there yet, but between me and the team at PeopleRain, we're gonna get there. By way of background, PeopleRain is actually the 7th company I've started in and around applying the principles of AI and machine learning to the world of work. And it's amazing over that, call it 25-ish years, how far we've come. And it's so gratifying to be able to build on top of amazing technologies like the ones we're going to be discussing today. My passion project is I host a podcast called AI and the Future of Work. We just published our 215th episode, and it really is an amazing collection of some of the world's greatest thinkers, innovators, technologists, authors, entrepreneurs who amazingly choose to come hang out with me. And we've got them all on tape. So I'd encourage you, go check out AI and the Future of Work. Before I get started with the session for today, I'm going to ask you to think of one answer to a really important question, because although we're here to talk about the state of generative AI, we're here to talk about humanity, and we're here to talk about what it is that makes us the best humans we can be. And I just shared my why. My why is helping improve 1 billion lives. What's your why? Think about that. Over the course of these next few slides and some comments that I'll share, just wanted you to think about why you're here and what's the little dent in the universe that you're gonna leave behind. With that said, there's some key questions that I will do my best to answer. These are important questions, and they take much longer than about the half hour or so that 35 minutes or so we're gonna have together. But I do wanna at least stir the pot, get us all thinking about what's going on now. What is generative AI and why all the hype? What are the ethical implications of AI? You'll hear me repeatedly talk about what it means to exercise AI responsibly. And perhaps most germane and the topic of today's discussion, what is the future of work? And how as a leader can you prepare for it? I'd say now more than ever, certainly in our lifetimes, every employee comes to work every day asking some really tough questions. Like, we're inundated by new technology that feels sometimes like it's sentient, and it feels sometimes like it can do the thing that we were trained to do. Maybe, we went to school 4, 6, 12, 18, however many years, and we perfected a skill. And then all of a sudden you come into work and your colleague's a bot, and you're questioning, is that bot going to replace me? Is it going to assist me? Is it going to make me better? Is it really as good as they say it's going to be? It says some real nonsense. So maybe it's not that good. So it's not just about what we see in the headlines and what is truth anymore. We're entering an interesting political cycle where we're going to have to question everything we see. It's not just about the technology. It really is asking ourselves these existential questions. And the thing that I want to leave you with, if perhaps you take nothing away from this session, is that the future of work is about augmenting your intelligence, making you as a human better. A few bits of data to kind of complement some of what else we're going to be discussing today. 88. It's an interesting number. Turns out that's the number of organizations that self-proclaim, this is from about the last month, self-proclaim they do not have a policy for how employees can use AI at work. 12 million is the net new number of jobs that the World Economic Forum says AI will create over the next 3 years. That's through a combination of eliminating 85 million jobs and creating 97 million new jobs. 7 trillion is the amount that Goldman Sachs says in the next 10 years, AI will contribute to global GDP, global domestic product. Think about that. It's a big number. And the last number I will leave you with that's certainly relevant to this slide is 49. 49 is the percent of US adult Americans who say they fear that AI is out to take their job. I hope that 100% of everyone listening to today's session will leave after we've had this good, healthy discussion, feeling like your job is not threatened by AI. I firmly believe that anything that can be predicted is better left to humans, but anything that, or sorry, better left to machines, but anything that requires rational thinking or empathy or judgment is better left to humans. So we will increasingly coexist with bots, but that doesn't mean that they're here to take over the things that make us human. So I mentioned the principles of responsible AI, and there are a lot of issues that are unresolved. We are at the most nascent stages possible of this transformation to large language models and these bots that can use natural language processing and natural language understanding to have conversational interactions with humans. But I want us to get comfortable as leaders asking and perhaps even answering some questions that are going to be really important to be able to make your team members, your organizations, the people that you hire feel comfortable with this new kind of coexistence between human and machine. So I put these on a scale of what I'll call pragmatic on the left side of the x-axis to existential. And on the bottom of the y-axis now, and on the top of the y-axis, call it, in the next 75 years or so. IP infringement, something that comes up frequently. We'll talk about that in a bit with regard to AI regulation. Who can sell work that's derived from your IP? What if it shows up in a large language model? How is all this going to get commercialized? Right now, we're in the earliest days, thanks to Uncle Microsoft. Most of our use of ChatGPT is free. It won't always be. It's actually very expensive. Llama 2 is the open source second version of the Llama model from Facebook, cost about $20 million to train. Thank you, Uncle Facebook, Uncle Meta. Biased input. Something to keep in mind is that these large language models are perfectly designed to replicate human bias. So I contend that certainly when I'm having discussions about where AI should and shouldn't augment my kids' work in school. I have two girls, 13 and 15. And they show me something that surprises them that maybe ChatGPT generated. I feel just the opposite. I'm more surprised based on knowing how these models operate when they say anything that's not nonsense. But just know that they hoovered up the darkest recesses of Reddit and other places that have a lot of content that you may not want your kids or your colleagues or your friends or your parents seeing. And just know that there is the potential that they will say things that we don't want them to say. Algorithmic accountability is the new field that's emerging that keeps the algorithm authors, the vendors, including PeopleReign. We should be held accountable for the actions of our algorithms. Who's a publisher? Who's a distributor? A lot of these thorny topics have been the hotly debated for years, only now there's so much more content and we don't know where it came from and we can't control it. And the bots that we interact with seem like they're sentient. So more than ever, we're having to ask, is OpenAI a platform? Are they responsible for the answers that they generate? Likewise, Microsoft, likewise, Amazon, Apple, Meta, etc. This is a fascinating topic. The geopolitics of AI. We often think of AI or data as being the new oil. It's an awful cliche. But nonetheless, we can think about this race for AI supremacy. And we, as a country, are certainly having to make decisions about policies based on what we feel like the ownership of AI, what impact that will have on our presence as a nation state. Explainability. Today, there's essentially no level of explainability that is expected from large language models. There must be. As a consumer of some of this content that could potentially be dangerous for us and those we love, we deserve to know where that content came from. We have to think about what's the impact of interacting with a bot that could potentially provide us with information that maybe we shouldn't have. And if we don't at least know its sources, and if we can't at least interrogate the algorithms and the models that generated that content, we should learn to not trust it. Class warfare, we've been through many technology cycles together, and we know that advanced technology can exaggerate or exacerbate the difference between the digital haves and the have-nots. And we're at a very important juncture in society where we're going to have to start being comfortable asking those questions. Privacy and safety. What does it mean when, let's say, a colleague at work chooses to potentially, if it's supported, and 88% of companies, they don't have a policy around what can and can't be done at work with LLMs. But let's say a colleague has a discussion with a chatbot about suicidal tendencies or about sexual harassment. What should our policy be when it's very easy to share openly information that is either incorrect, misleading, or could lead to unintended consequences? Mental health, similarly, who's responsible and who's monitoring to make sure that all of this technology is being used responsibly? Lastly, something that, gosh, this is a pretty heavy set of topics, but they all are really, really important, and I want us all to take them seriously. Will there be a point when, as those who espouse the beliefs of singularity say carbon and silicon life forms will converge? I would argue that bioinformatics, wearables, sensor networks are already helping us lead to a point where, not for bad, but for good, prosthetics will become smart, they'll be AI aided. Think about pacemakers or fewer deaths on the battlefield, being able to have oil rigs maintained by machines rather than people, and have the humans turn the levers. But lots of ways that we can eliminate what we frequently refer to as jobs that are dull, dirty, and dangerous, and replace them with jobs that are safer. And I do believe, I'm an AI optimist and AI enthusiast, that we're going to come together as a community. But when you hear the World Economic Forum say this new technology is going to create a net new 12 million jobs, if you're like me, you step back from this conversation and say, only 12 million? That is 3 years, but I think it's more like 120 million or maybe a billion, because all of these important topics need expertise, and that expertise is going to come from smart humans. So I wanted to go through a case study. I know we're here to talk about the future of work. So examples of how organizations that are progressive and investing in better employee experiences think about using all these principles of AI and machine learning to first and foremost make humans better. So talent management, how can we use AI to help select the best candidates for open roles? Now, there's always a flip side of this. We need to make sure that we're not using biased data with algorithms that will potentially output biased decisions. But rich topic for engaging AI in the workplace. Onboarding. Let's not treat our most valuable resources like tickets. let's anticipate their needs and let's guide them through using automation and machine learning, guide them through a premium experience that really treats them like first-class citizens in our organization. IT and HR service, gosh, every time an employee has a question about their laptop or their mobile phone or their benefits or their PTO or their payroll, it turns out someone else has had that question on the planet in history. And so what if you could build kind of one big digital brain that knew everything that everyone in IT or HR ever knew? That's the future work. It's being able to get those best answers faster and freeing up the humans to author better content and provide better support for employees and get through the backlog and do things that only humans can do, provide that high-touch experience. But let's be okay leaving a lot of the things that are easy to automate to machines. Process automation, figuring out what orchestration tasks to take. We used to call it runbook automation, but a lot of that combined with some machine learning and conversational AI can lead to amazing gains in productivity. Training and development, let's nurture every employee through the life cycle of their engagement and figure out what skills they need. Let's invest in upskilling. Let's invest in reskilling. The only way we're going to fill all those net new jobs that these new technologies require is by thinking about the human process as being one where we continuously have an opportunity, an exciting one, to keep learning and improving ourselves. Resource planning, who do we need? Where do we need them? What geography? Who's exceeding? Who's hitting their KPIs? This is all a good challenge for a lot of data and some interesting algorithms. Content reviews, generative AI, it's obviously one of its superpowers. I'd urge you to think about how creative you want it to be. They are levers that can be turned for each LLM, large language model, but certainly a good way to invest in creativity throughout the organization, and of course, all the way through to offboarding. So my challenge to you is think about every business process, think about every role, think about every department as creating an opportunity for you to engage with augmented intelligence. Nothing artificial about it. It's going to be your co-pilot. It's going to be your guide. It's going to help you be 20 to 25% more productive. And the sooner we think about how to inspire other leaders, other teams at work, the faster we can accelerate this digital transformation. Now, this is the limit of the amount of technical discussion we're going to have today, but I thought it was useful at least to spend a minute or two talking about what an LLM is, and perhaps even a little bit how it's trained, and most importantly, why should you care? Most of the time, you shouldn't care. Most of the time, we should be focused on business problems and using perhaps technology to solve business problems. But we always want to think about what's the problem, what are the success metrics, who are the stakeholders, and most important, how does it impact the humans at work? But nonetheless, it's important to know that a large language model, not just the GPT family of models, but the Anthropic Claude model, the PaLM model from Google, the Llama series of models from Meta, et cetera, they were all trained in a similar way. We ingest a bunch of data, hundreds of billions of what are called parameters, and we create word embeddings from that data. And what those word embeddings do is basically create kind of a vector space. And in that vector space, when we provide what's called an inference or an utterance, we ask the chatbot to do something. What it's going to do is map our utterance, the thing that we say in natural language, to the most similar place in vector space, in that word embedding land, that model. That's how the large language model actually works. Everything is treated as ultimately an integer. And for those of us who took linear algebra in school, this is the most awesome possible use of linear algebra. You never thought you'd hear that term again. It's matrix multiplication at phenomenal scale. But the reason I put this slide together is because I want you to know that every time you think you're having a conversation with a sentient being, you're not. You're having a conversation with a statistical representation of a language. And when you ingest hundreds of billions of parameters, gosh, you can train a chatbot to feel like it knows a lot. But when you see it hallucinate or make up facts, you understand why now, because it's just looking for the next best word based on the prompt that you provided it. It's just predicting the next best word. So let's be hyper aware of what it is and isn't capable of doing so that we can make sure that we're better prepared to answer some of those questions that I posed a few minutes ago. So I want you to get comfortable with how comically immature today's generative AI technology is. And across a few dimensions, this is just a survey course. This is the real quick study guide to where we are today and where we're headed. Now, to be fair, the seminal paper, the academic paper from Google that introduced the transformer model, which led to large language models, was published in 2017. And then obviously it was November of 2022 that the world was introduced to ChatGPT. So we're less than 9 months into this experiment. Yet the thing I want you to realize is that where we've been so far, it's nowhere even close to like where we're going to be in the years up ahead. And so when we think about perhaps a singularity, the convergence of carbon and silicon life forms in the next 75 years, that's more of the timescale that technologists are thinking about. We will no longer have to deal with limitations of memory. You're probably familiar with the fact that the ChatGPT 3.5 model only remembers the last 8,000 tokens about 3/4 of a word that it's been fed. So it forgets very quickly. These models are phenomenally expensive. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, when they're being subsidized by big tech. That's going to go away. The cost of these services, the quality will increase significantly, but the costs will as well. They're extremely power hungry. These models, to train on billions of parameters or hundreds of billions of parameters, certainly the original foundational models, that being the GPT family of models, they consumed football field sized rooms of some of the semiconductors that have made NVIDIA a Wall Street darling. That's got to change. We've got to think about the energy footprint of AI, the learning rate. It's slow today. It will improve. The UX. Imagine that we're all hyperventilating over basically a web page that looks like Google or Yahoo circa like 1998. It's going to get better. Today, these large language models only have been trained on text. Well, 98% of the world's data is not text. So soon what you'll see is these models are going to extend out to the physical or the spatial world. Think about everything you experience as a human being. You touch a hot stove, you smell a tree, you can see a pyramid, you feel the heat. All of those things can't be learned, and that's what's always going to separate us as sentient beings from what these large language models can do. There's no auditability today. We question the accuracy of LLMs. Today, we have to know what to ask in order to get an answer, and there's very little in the way of content filtering. These all will change. Regulation, we've started to hear some of the more progressive countries or continents around the world proposing laws for how to regulate some of this stuff. And it's a very interesting discussion topic for a whole separate session, just on how and by who, in what ways should AI be regulated. I firmly believe that in the next 18 months, AI will be assigned a hygiene score, kind of like when you go to a restaurant and in the kitchen window, it's got a score or a letter grade typically. I don't know about you, but I'm not hanging out in like the B and the C grade restaurants because like that's where there's rats in the kitchen. AI is the same way. There are rats in the kitchen, but we don't see them. There's no standard way to tell what AI was produced in a responsible way, how it was produced, how it was trained, what the weights were that were used to build the model. There must be. And we're in the earliest stages of starting to think through these approaches. This slide provides two very different approaches, one the US approach and two the EU, which is actually far ahead of the US today. The EU has taken a more centralized approach, more tight regulation of AI, including things like enforcing every model to be able to publicly share where its data, what data it was trained on, when it was trained, what the weights were, so how it is trained to do certain tasks. It's a more heavy-handed approach, but arguably one that will lead to an easier to enforce proliferation of AI technologies that is perhaps safer for consumers. The US has taken a more market-based approach in the interest of using AI to spur innovation and to catalyze a lot of the benefits that I talked through, like in that AI for work case study. The US has proposed that let's let the market figure out how to price it, how to regulate it. And as we all saw, some of our leaders have been on Capitol Hill saying, Congress, let us grade our own homework. That was kind of the message of Sam Altman to Congress. I'll keep politics out of this conversation, but very different approaches. In the last 24 to 72 hours, Japan actually proposed some new regulations as well that are more closely aligned with the US approach. In fact, proposing that this is a very interesting topic for debate, but Japan proposed that even copyrighted material can be disseminated through large language models. And obviously that's been, whether it's the writer's strike in Hollywood or other authors are concerned about potentially their copyrighted material being infringed by large language models. These are all fascinating topics. Certainly, we're at the stage now where we're ready to ask questions. We don't necessarily have answers, but I want you to at least start to get familiar with some of the key questions that are being asked about regulatory frameworks. So let's take this down a level. We've been talking about some pretty heady topics. How do you implement LLMs in your enterprise? So what you should all be able to deliver rapidly is a personal digital concierge that is specifically designed as, call it a ChatGPT for every employee. So what we want is we want to bring all the benefits, not the risks, but all the benefits of having that, call it your wise friend, right? That wise friend that's always there. You call them up, say, hey, I need a hand, I need a ride, can you help me, answer this question, let's hang out, I want to test this joke out on you, whatever it is. Just the thing that makes us great humans is that we interact with each other and we've got, kind of these people who are our confidants. Very soon at work, employees will expect and have access to their own personal digital concierge that will get to know them, their geography, their budget threshold, what team they're on, what projects matter to them, what their skill set is, and it can recommend kind of the most productive path through work. And what we need to get comfortable doing is figuring out how do we do that in a way that is responsible. And so on the left-hand side, I show a list of some of the topics we've already been discussing. We have to make sure that these personal digital concierges don't expose your enterprise proprietary intellectual property. We need to make sure that, let's say, if marketing is using LLMs to generate content, that we don't infringe on other people's copyrighted work. We need to make sure that there are certain topics, I mentioned things like suicide prevention or sexual harassment, that are explicitly out of scope for anything that personal digital concierge can do. We need to make sure that every time an employee uses one of these tools, it's done in a way that's consistent with our ethics, in a way that's done in a way that's consistent with our policies. And that policy management needs to be built into that LLM gateway. So we can not just deploy these very powerful technologies responsibly, but as we onboard new employees and as these employees use these technologies, we feel comfortable knowing what they can and can't do, so that we can educate the organization and really embrace innovation. So the topic of today is the future of work. And so I put together a few thoughts, 3 columns: people, process, and technology. I mentioned I've published over 200 podcasts about this topic. So not only is it something I'm kind of passionate about, but I thought I would, just in preparing this slide, take a step back and think about a couple of years worth of conversations with real visionaries and what I've learned over the years. People. I believe like a gentleman named Gary Bowles, who's a great guest on my podcast. He's a futurist, great thinker, and an author. He says, the workforce will soon become a work net. And what that work net will consist of is the best versions of ourselves, combined based on doing only tasks that we love doing. So that when we're investing in our own learning, we're investing in learning that we love to do. It's kind of that hobby, that task, the thing that you derive energy from. And that will only be possible because we're going to be able to extract out a lot of the things that sap our energy. So just imagine if you showed up at work every day and you were only working with people who love what they do. We're the best at doing that thing. And we could create these ad hoc teams based on people who are just there to invest in things that they're passionate about. Gosh, that's a world of work that I want my kids to grow up in. And I hope that as a technology community, we can accelerate that world of work. It's going to be harder and harder for us to perpetuate this teleconomy where we tell the employees when they can work and where they can work and what tools they can use and how they can use them. And we slap them on the wrist when they go astray. That's not the world of work that is going to be the one that's going to be predominant in the next decade. It's going to be an ask economy where we trust and value and respect our team members. And as leaders, it's going to be up to us. We can accelerate the adoption of these kinds of principles as fast as we want, but it starts with just a healthy conversation like the one we're having today. Process and technology. So you can expect that service will come to you. You can expect that AI and machine learning will be essentially ambient in the enterprise. It will know things like what temperature you like the conference room and how many people are in that meeting that you're about to have. And how about I book it for you? And when you go to travel to an office, it knows that you're there from a remote office and it'll get you on Wi-Fi. These are the things that nobody likes doing. Nobody should have to spend time getting on the guest Wi-Fi network or helping have their laptop repaired. These are things that happen millions, tens of millions of times a day. Great opportunity for us to extract all that friction out of work. And what's left is work that people love. Technology. So think about that comment I made earlier. What can be predicted is better left to machines, but what requires rational thinking is better left to humans. That's the world that we're rapidly approaching, is where we can devolve that process of recall to machines because they're great at memorizing a bunch of facts. Sometimes they memorize non-facts as well, but increasingly they'll be good at only sharing actual facts, and it'll free us up to be the best version of ourselves when we figure out where to get the information. We don't have to memorize it. It pains me to think of, I don't know about anyone on this discussion, but if anyone took organic chemistry, what a travesty that was. The amount of things that we had to memorize that we will never, ever use again. Even organic chemists, I don't think have to memorize that stuff. The same applies to work, right? We're going to rapidly be in a world of work where there's relatively little that we'll need to commit to memory, but we want to embrace AI as a co-pilot, that wise friend. We want to know where to get the answers. And that way we can spend more of our time assimilating those answers that we go and get with big ideas that only people think. And we're going to be thinking those big ideas with people who love thinking big ideas. That's the future of work. That's the future of humans. So if you're excited about this world of work, this future of humanity like I am, I'd recommend three good additional starting points. Yuval Noah Harari, if you haven't read anything by him, I think this is a good starting point. Homo Deus, amazing thinker, amazing writer. Kai-Fu Lee, I mentioned the geopolitics of AI superpowers. Kai-Fu Lee was formerly the head of Google China. He's now a venture capitalist. It's a thought-provoking read. Max Tegmark is a professor at MIT. He wrote a somewhat dystopian fictional account of life in the future, Life 3.0. I encourage you to go check that out. I said I wanted to leave you with a few questions, and the main question is, what's your why? But there's some other questions that I want to pose. Whether if we have a few minutes in the Q&A session, I'd love to start at least to engage in this dialogue, but also some questions that are important for you to take back to your work environments and start to be the leader of that responsible AI strategy. And it kind of starts with these. Where are there opportunities at work to deliver better service? How can we improve productivity? How can we reduce the mean time to resolve issues, get people back to work faster, help them love what they do, help them feel motivated to spend that extra hour doing a project that they love, maybe something they wouldn't have done otherwise. Because you know what? They come into work and they're super motivated because they don't have to worry about, that hour a day, that, half a day a week or whatever, where they're treated like a number, put in a queue. Like, that's not what brings out the best in people. Newsflash. What's a business problem AI can solve? Think about what the business needs from you, and think about how, as a leader, you can be the best version of human and improve profitability, or help a young colleague do the best work of their life, or motivate someone to pursue a new skill or a hobby. Maybe the business problem is help everyone do 5 days of work in 4 days. That's a noble cause. We're going to have the power rapidly to be able to do things like that. Think about who are the stakeholders. Think about where the training data lives. All AI ultimately comes down to a data problem. Think about what are the success metrics. How are we going to know if we've achieved our goal? It's not about whether or not the quote AI works. I don't even know what that means. Nobody has an AI problem, right? They have a business problem. And we always want to think about it in terms of embracing the humanness of work and thinking about what it means to use AI and machine learning to make humans better. I mentioned earlier, 88% of companies don't have a policy on use of generative AI. Let's make sure your companies are not in that 88%. One of the things that I encourage certainly all PeopleReign customers to do as a starting point is something that couldn't be any less or more non-technical. So we talk about AI models, and we talk about billions of parameters, and we talk about linear algebra and things that can seem fairly complex. But you know what? There's one thing I'd recommend that you do that isn't complex at all. Start here. Ask every employee to take an AI pledge that goes something like this. I will openly share when any of my work product has been augmented by AI. That simple statement goes a long way. It does 3 things specifically. 1, from a governance perspective, your organization will soon be expected to be able to publish exactly when and how AI was used. It's important for all the reasons we've been discussing: copyright infringement, IP leakage, bias detection. A lot of these things can only be addressed once there's auditability. Solves one problem. That's a fairly tactical one. The second problem, or not problem, or the second advantage of having every employee take a version of that pledge is that as a leadership team or as an organization, you create a culture that says we embrace innovation. We embrace things that can make our team members better. We embrace new technologies. And then the third thing that is kind of an ancillary benefit of having every employee take that pledge is that you know what's going to happen? The hallways, maybe they're virtual, maybe they're physical, but they're going to start to buzz with new ideas, like awesome stuff. Like, hey, did you hear what Terry did? Like, Terry changed my world. Like, she gave me back a couple hours a week because she suggested, this prompt or, this automation task or this thing, and it made my whole team better. So cool for Terry, because she introduced this innovation that everybody's going to be talking about. And just imagine when everyone's a Terry and everybody's inspiring everybody else about what they're doing. And gosh, that's an organization that I really want to be a part of. So I'd encourage you, just as one pragmatic idea, super non-technical, but encourage your organizations to have employees take that pledge. We've got a panel discussion. I'm leading the panel. It's September 18th. You can scan the QR code if you want to hear another version of this with a few of the exceptional guests who have been on the AI in the Future of Work podcast. Make sure this is a starting point for this conversation. Another place to go is if you scan that QR code, that's a link to recent episodes. In fact, the one that we just published this week is we're sitting here in the law firm of Fenwick and West, and it wasn't timed this way, but this week's guest is an amazing leader, an amazing technologist named Jim McKenna, who's the CIO of Fenwick and West, a renowned law firm, and he talks a lot about legal tech and how AI is improving lives, at least in the legal community. Now, with that said, that's a lot of words for me, and that's a lot of things to think about. I asked you to think about what's your why. I hope you've had a little bit of time to at least think about this outside of the context of just what the technology is. It's always easy to get enamored with the technology as technologists, but now's the time when your friends, your colleagues, your kids, your parents need you to think about what it means to assimilate great technology with what it means to be the best version of a human. And with that said, I'll pause, and if Terry lets me, I'll take a few questions, or
yeah, it's
Jason.
up to you. It's after 1. You said you had a hard
Yeah.
stop. So if anybody has any questions, I will put, there was one comment that I thought you might find interesting. You find it back here. There was a comment that in your slides, you went from, like slide 3, you went from pragmatic to existential, and that your colors on your slides went from green to yellow to red, which would be like go, caution, stop. And he wondered if that was intentional or unconscious.
It was intentional. And for a much longer conversation, we could talk about why those are placed on that grid. It's my grid, so I get to put those squares wherever I want, and I can color them wherever I want. Whoever asked the question, I'd love to have a further discussion about what maybe if you color code them differently. But that wasn't lost on me. It was somewhat intentional.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was Michael Dortch. You heard that, Michael, did you?
Michael, yep.
So connect with Dan on
My
LinkedIn.
day,
Michael and I are
Yeah.
on in
you are already
about
connected?
45 minutes. We'll be
Oh,
talking
okay,
on
very
another
good.
call.
So then
Oh, good.
you have kindred spirits, sounds like.
Well, thanks everyone for joining today, and that's my contact information. Please take me up on the offer.
Yeah.
Anything that provoked thought for you, please follow up, and I'd love to be part of your journey.
Thank you, Dan, very much. And thank you, Jason, for partnering with us for this hybrid event. We're going to be doing more of these hybrid events with other HCI local chapters over the coming year. And Jason, you probably already talked about your September event, but you want to plug that real quick?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Terry. And thank you, Dan. This is a great conversation and an excellent presentation. I really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
your
me,
time
Jason.
here today. Yes.
Well, you didn't plug it for my guests in the room, so really quickly.
Yeah, real quick. So the virtual community is putting on a panel discussion in September. I believe it's September 18th. And
12th.
it is on September 12th. There it is, September 12th, on the service desk transformations. So we have 4 different panelists who have led their organizations through transformations, and we want to talk about what the thought process was before they got started, what did they encounter while they were working through the transformation, and what was the outcome at the end. So we'll talk about that. Please check out the virtual community online and check out that events calendar to find a link to register. So appreciate everyone joining today, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks so much.
Bye,
All right, bye-bye, everybody. Take care.